The morning in the forest seemed the same as always, a light haze over the boulders, the glare of the dawn's sun on the wet leaves. But as soon as Yakov stepped onto the narrow path, he heard a whisper, as if thousands of voices were rustling among the branches. His heart began to beat faster, and he wondered if he was ready for what lay behind the familiar shadows of this place. Strange footprints were found on the site of yesterday's fox trail. Instead of soft prints, there were dry splintered chips, and their outlines glowed with a cold green light. Yakov bent down, ran his finger along the grooves in the ground, and felt a slight prick, as if the soil itself were rejecting the touch. The thought of a demonic presence flashed through my mind, but the photographer couldn't be intimidated by the supernatural. He couldn't help but capture this ghost of the forest. Picking up the camera, Yakov pulled the trigger. It wasn't just a forest landscape that was waiting for him in the lens. Where the path led around a bend, the vague silhouette of a fox became clearer and clearer, and her eyes shone like emeralds. A flash illuminated the fragile shape, and at the same moment the fog disappeared, and with it the footprints. The photographer was left alone, with a shot that promised to answer thousands of questions and generate hundreds of new ones. The first nightmare. At night, Yakov woke up to the feeling of icy breath at his temple. A slight shudder ran through his body as he turned his head. In the shadows, the inscription on the wall of the room formed into runes similar to those he had seen in the forest. The wall itself seemed to be breathing, and the drawing slowly flickered with subdued light. His heart sank into his heels, and he instinctively crossed himself, although he did not believe in religious rituals. He saw a fox in his dream, more precisely, a demon in the guise of a red-haired predator with sparkling fur. She stood surrounded by the fading figures of people, and every time she moved her lips, a light smoke came out of her mouth. "You are free, but you will pay with blood," she whispered in a voice that seemed to consist of 1,000 whispers. Yakov woke up in a cold sweat and found thin but deep scratches on his chest. At dawn, the camera was lying on the bedside table, with the lens stained with dried red liquid. Yakov gingerly touched his finger to the dents on the hull. The camera, which had served him faithfully for years, seemed desecrated. The hustle and bustle of the city was left far behind, and the feeling of a nightmare did not disappear like a dream. The demonic fox had already become part of his reality. The whisper of the trees. After these events, Yakov seemed to have lost his footing. The forest seemed to respond to his every step, branches creaked, roots whispered softly, and claws rustled somewhere in the foliage. He walked along a familiar path, but it was changing. The narrow ones were splitting off, and the boulders unfolded as if forming a maze wall. Suddenly, he came across a well, hidden from prying eyes by thick moss and broken planks of the lid. The same mysterious runes as in his dream are burned into the tree next to him. Faint footsteps could be heard from there, as if someone was coming down. Yakov crouched at the edge. He could only see a slight flicker below, but he could sense demonic power from every sound. Grabbing his camera, he decided to look inside. Focusing proved impossible, the lens refused to capture the image, and everything he saw blurred into a greenish haze. Only when trying to light the well with a flash, the shadow of a fox flashed in the depths. One long curved grin stretched across the beast's face. The camera slipped out of his hands, but Yakov already knew that the demon was out hunting. The blood right. Realizing that he would not be able to figure it out on his own, Yakov went to the witch doctor Agathia, the one who lived at the edge of the forest in an ancient hut on chicken legs. Her cruel gaze and ash-white hair were frightening, but she agreed to listen. According to her, the demonic fox is the spirit of an ancient forest, encased in a cage of magical bonds. His power increases with every drop of human blood, and in order to subdue the beast, a special kind of sacrifice is required. The healer showed a Celtic symbol burned into the middle of the runes, and explained that blood gives energy, and memory gives shape. You can let go of the memories of your past, and the spirit will sleep forever. But the price is a heart exhausted from emptiness, she said in a voice devoid of compassion. Yakov refused without hesitation. Determination flashed in his eyes, he was ready to risk everything just to save those who had become dear to him. But the more he thought about it, the more clearly he saw in the mirror the reflection of a man deprived of his own history. Shadows of the past. From that day on, the camera became a tool of demonic hunting. Yakov found in it photographs not of the landscapes he had taken, but fragments of his life, his first school portrait, his mother's pie on the kitchen table, his sister's laughter. Each photo was distorted, faces and objects were distorted, and the eyes in the pictures glowed with black flames. With each deleted frame, the memory lost brightness. One morning, he couldn't remember the name of the art teacher. On another day, the smells of his home disappeared beyond his memories. His heart ached with pain, and the demonic fox seemed to swallow his past without a trace. Yakov understood that he would soon turn into an empty shell. His efforts to capture the demon on film backfired, he gave him his soul bit by bit. Meeting in the night fog. One moonlit night, Yakov returned to the trail with the last hope of catching the demon in the camera. But no fox appeared in front of him, a man in a wooden fox mask stepped out of the fog. He moved lightly, but every move was deliberately sinister. "You're looking for an answer, but the answer is just another question," he said in a voice that had sunk into the night. "I offer a deal, a portion of the memories in exchange for the key to freeing the spirit." Yakov saw a glint in the glass eye sockets of the mask and felt a piercing chill. But before he could make a decision, the mask tore off, the face of Agafia the healer appeared under it, and her eyes sparkled with hatred. The demon hunter's spirit used her to mislead Yakov. The long-running game took a deadly turn when Artyom, an old friend of Yakov's, emerged from the forest. He jumped out under a torch shot, mistaking the photographer for a demon's minion. "I've been hunting this beast for a long time," he shouted, pulling out his knife and rushing forward. A fierce fight broke out between friends, knives gnashed against trees, screams echoed through the forest, and the silent figure of a fox loomed over them. She watched as if enjoying the sight. Yakov tried to call out to Artyom, but he did not hear, there was only fanatical fire in his eyes. In the end, Yakov had to use a forbidden technique. He blinded his friend with a flash pulse, but the price was the last charge from the camera. While Artyom was writhing on the ground, the demon came out of the shadows and hooked both of them with ghostly chains. His laughter echoed through the trees. "I need you both," he whispered. "One will stay, the other will leave." The chains sparkled with green flames, entangling the hearts of friends and tearing apart their unity. Yakov felt the runes on the ground around the well awaken. They shone and began to draw in the memories of both of them. At that moment, the photographer realized that no stone or rite could save him without a true sacrifice, without the sacrifice of love and devotion, without which the spirit would not let go of its bonds. Chapter 9. The Last Frame. Summoning the last of his strength, Yakov lifted the camera, which remained a distant shadow of the former weapon, and pointed it directly at the demon's eye. He didn't think about the picture, he just felt his soul pressing against his ribs. With a desperate cry, he pulled the trigger. A powerful flash exploded the lens, melting a nearby tree and ripping out wisps of fog. The fox groaned, and the chains collapsed. The demon howled and grabbed both Yakov and Artyom in an attempt to drag them into the depths of the ruins. But instead, he fell into a sinkhole, the chains broke, and the forest quieted down again. There were only pieces of the camera and a broken fox mask left on the ground. The morning brought silence, but it wasn't real. Black mushrooms with purple spores grew among the ashes from photographic equipment. They slowly spread out along the edge of the forest, leaving behind a barely audible heartbeat. A silhouette was reflected in the pond, not Yakov, not Artyom, but a half-decomposed figure that looked like a fox with a human face. There was a light in her eyes, cold and treacherous. The water baked all around, and from the depths of the forest came a whisper of new power, "We'll meet again." The forest path has changed forever. Even the wind sounded different now, like a call beckoning those who would dare to come for new secrets.